Hello, I'm Elijah Henderson with Cryptid Studies Institute. For more hours and days than we could possibly calculate, we have been working feverishly and extensively on the next part of our Beast of LBL trilogy. We are actually working on the third part as well, but that will come down the pike at a later date. This has truly been a labor of love for us, and it's just a general passion for us making this video. Throughout this video, you'll also have audio commentary, and you'll see on-site footage of the scenes where they actually happened. So without further ado, I hope you truly enjoy this video on the Beast of LBL. Titus Macius Plautus, the ancient Roman playwright, once wrote, "Where there are sheep, the wolves are never very far away. Since time immemorial, wolves have always been feared and hated, and not always unjustly, but many times they've been made to answer for the sins of men. Because throughout history, many men who committed the blackest of base crimes against their fellow man made a scapegoat of the mysterious forest dweller, and if they didn't outright blame wolves as a whole, many of them claimed to have either been possessed of the spirit of a wolf, or transformed into a wolf and carried out their infamous crimes. Two such cases involved individuals who were tried as werewolves and were either imprisoned or executed. Peter Stube, whom we have reported on in the past, was a German farmer who was tried for werewolfery and executed on October 31st, 1589, after confessing to practicing black magic and making a pact with the devil to receive a mystical belt that allowed him to shapeshift. But he also confessed to killing and cannibalizing 18 people. The other notable case was that of Jean Grenier, a 14-year-old French boy who claimed to be able to change at will into a ravening wolf, and further claimed that he often stalked and ate a number of children while in the form of a wolf. Jean was promptly arrested, but because of his tender age, he was imprisoned in a monastery instead of executed. Jean died just a few years later in captivity. Cases like these in the Middle Ages led to a kind of werewolf hysteria, and people deeply believed in the possibility that a man could transform into a werewolf and spend much of his time in that shape. Others believed in beings called the cynocephali, which was a race of dog-headed men, and many notable historians wrote of these fantastic individuals as though they were real. Still others believed in a tribe of beings called wolvers from the Celtic land. The creatures are said to have a human-esque shape, but have the heads of wolves, human-like hands with razor-sharp claws, and the backward bent legs of a canine, and it is alleged that they could go forth on either 2 legs or 4. The Native Americans believe to this very day in the very real sense in skinwalkers, evil medicine men practicing dark shaman magic. The belief in werewolves, wolfmen, dogmen, and skinwalkers is alive and well today, and many people believe that one such creature is alive and well right here in modern-day America, and of all places, right in the heart of one of our national parks, or rather, one of our national recreation areas. The enigmatic perplexity of Land Between the Lakes and its mysterious best is an ever-deepening conundrum that many would say borders on conspiracy theory or outright fantasy. And I would almost agree if the stories were not so widespread and the witnesses so sure and truthful about what they have seen, experienced, and encountered. It would be easy to write it all off if the locations where the events allegedly took place didn't exist. But they do. And many of those who lay claim to being first-hand witnesses all seem to go to the very same places when showing others where they lived through what is to them seemed like scenes straight out of a horror movie. Lore and legends for this area go all the way back to the 1700s when French trappers and hunters were plying their trades across the region that is today known as Kentucky. These brave and adventure-hardened pathfinders declared and insisted that the forests and lands were inhabited by creatures that some refer to as loups-garous or wolfmen, terrifying beasts that appeared to be half-caste amalgamations of men and wolves. The beasts were said to howl their blood-curdling dark songs into the night, and leave mangled and mutilated animals and livestock scattered about, and to cause general mayhem by frightening local residents. Whatever the truth may be, many people today still fear the beasts, which are still reportedly seen to this day. Witnesses have attested that they have seen the mysterious monsters in their forest abodes. One even claims he saw what appeared to be a female crossing the roadway with a litter of pups. Others still claim to have been assailed, stalked, and even chased by these fearsome monstrosities along the main thoroughfares, along waterways, while camping, and even while visiting the infamous Hotel California. Land Between the Lakes has no shortages of creature sightings, and whatever the truth may be, the place is mysterious at best, and certain elements of the local lore and legends have a striking similitude to the 1977 horror masterpiece book that spawned the immortal classic movie, and in my humble opinion, best werewolf movie of all time, The Howling. The Howling tells the story of a young couple who moves to a rural community called Drago, where the townsfolk and locals share and protect a sinister secret. That secret being that the town has a werewolf that lives there and is responsible for a series of murders and disappearances that go back decades. The couple eventually becomes entangled in a mystery and ultimately finds themselves beset in a nightmare as they realize that the town doesn't have one werewolf, rather a whole multitude, as it is revealed that the entire town shares the curse of the werewolf, and all are responsible for the carnage. I say that there are similarities, not because I believe that the nearby towns are filled to bursting with supernatural monsters, but because the towns seem to share some sort of dark secret, or maybe a mass psychosis. I've interviewed individuals who have warned me to keep my business private when I'm there researching the legend, especially if I'm staying at the local hotels. The individuals interviewed have laid claim that more than a few have seemingly just vanished from hotels in the region. Is it true? I can't hazard a guess, but that is what we have been told as truth. Other supposed truths that we have been told is that a part of the neighboring communities share the belief that one of the local families in the area is actually a family that has the ability to transform into werewolves and have roamed these woodlands for decades after the curse was brought to these lands by a European settler who settled there in the 1800s. The supposed family of afflicted lycanthropes still roam the area and now use the LBL National Recreation Area as their private hunting grounds. We do not hold to this belief, but some do, and they do not speak of it above a whisper, if they speak of it at all. Others still maintain that the ferocious creature is a skinwalker, or the ghost of a skinwalker who was once a Shawnee medicine man that dabbled heavily into the dark arts and became so evil that he was tracked down and killed by the members of his own tribe. Again, we do not share this belief either. We currently share the opinion that the beast is a flesh and blood cryptid creature known as a Dogman. However, we are not so arrogant to say that what we believe is the final word on the subject, as there are no experts in this field, and we certainly are not. And for what it is worth, we will follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads in a direction that challenges our own long-held paradigms, and we will follow any lead to its conclusion, no matter how fantastical it may be. And we will not hoard information, but rather share it freely, unless it may cause others harm. Having said all that, let's take a look at the barbarous beast of LBL and the claims made about it. The beast of LBL rose to the highest echelons of infamy when reports surfaced that claimed that the beast is responsible for the horrific mutilation and murder of a family of 4 some years ago, and has been linked, at least through the rumor mill, and at least one now deceased eyewitness, to at least 7 and possibly 9 deaths or mysterious disappearances in the Land Between the Lakes area. However, today, we will focus our attention on the most prevailing, undying accusation of them all, the nefarious RV Massacre. Before getting underway, I have to admit that, to this day, I know of no one who has been able to provide one shred of documented proof, newspaper, or news report to validate the incident actually took place. However, many people over the years have come forth claiming either to have been on location while the bodies in the crime scene were being processed, or had family or friends on location, or had heard the story firsthand from those directly involved in the alleged investigation. Having said that, this is the story as has been reported over the years, and after the many years that I've been hearing the tale, it has changed very little. However, we question a few of the facts. We don't doubt them, but we believe that a couple could have been embellished a bit over time, but we are not dogmatic over that belief. With no further ado, the allegation. The story is told that in the late winter or early spring of 1982, most likely in the late February or early March time frame, a rather well-to-do family from parts unknown decided to pay a visit to Land Between the Lakes and spend a few days enjoying the park and avoiding the crowds before tourist season set in for the season. They arrived at the park around 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the extreme northern end of the park, there in Land Between the Lakes, where they chose to hunker down for the evening in an isolated but very modern and swanky RV park that came complete with lights, bathhouses, and water, all the conveniences that a traveling upscale family could want. The park was largely or completely empty, except for the family in question, and I would suspect that it was completely devoid of other persons. Otherwise, the calamitous events that were about to take place would have no doubt alerted multiple spectators. As previously stated, the family pulled in around 3 o'clock and backed into one of the slips set aside for RV parking, and from what we have been able to gather, the family chose the last slip on the furthest east side of the park, on the side nearest the ravine. Being as this was at a time of year before daylight savings time, the father went to work prepping the site for the evening because darkness would fall soon and the RV would need to be leveled. And although their recreational vehicle was one of the nicer available in 1982, it did not come with self-levelers, and it needed to be done manually. The family consisted of 4 individuals, as the story goes: a father, a mother, a son somewhere around 1 to 12 years old, and a 9-year-old daughter. Some iterations of the story portray the daughter as much younger, and I cannot argue her age one way or the other, as I was not there. Working against the clock, Dad and the boy began to level the front of the RV, and they were deeply engrossed in their tasks when the wholesale slaughter is said to have begun. Witnesses that claim insight for law enforcement on the scene saw that it was now around 4 o'clock, and it was starting to become dusky dark. Dad and son were, as said a moment ago, were leveling the front when the creature that has become known as the Beast of LBL, a suspected Type 4 Dogman, came up presumably from down by the lake and through the neighboring hollow, and made its way around the left side of the vehicle on the driver's side and encountered the terrified duo. We can only speculate as to how the 2 victims might have reacted to the sight of the unnatural aberration standing right before them, like something out of a horror movie. I would imagine that they were almost paralyzed with fear as the werewolf-looking beast commenced to mangle and mutilate them. The story states that Dad was the first to go, dispatched in a most ghastly way. Every version of the account that I have heard ends with Dad either being decapitated or having his head twisted around completely around backwards. The majority of versions state that the head was removed, as well as one or both of the arms. It is interesting that the Dad's head was allegedly removed, and dogmen are said to primarily remove the heads of their prey, at least according to some researchers in the field. The creature, having mutilated Dad, now sets its awful sights on the son, who has fled for the door on the passenger side on the RV, seeking sanctuary from the certain death that even now was pursuing him. If the stories are true, the young man made it all the way to the door before the monster caught up to him and rent him to literal shreds, ending his young life. At this point, Mom is said to have become aware of what is happening and sees her son tattered and torn like a rag doll by a nightmarish monster that is not even supposed to exist according to science. Mom is understandably traumatized and screaming uncontrollably as she watches her son's life extinguished before her very eyes. Unfortunately for her, the bestial abomination's attentions resolutely drawn to her. The creature is said to have torn the door from the vehicle's hinges and gained entrance into the inside of the trailer, where Mom and daughter have been assumedly been preparing things for the evening. All accounts that have been given by supposed witnesses and police officers who are said to have worked the crime scene are all in agreement on this point, that Mom, for whatever reason, was savaged so badly that many of the crime scene hardened officers had to go outside and vomit. Mom is said to have been horribly slaughtered, and the entirety of the trailer's inner cabin looked like something worse than a horror movie could have possibly concocted. One prevailing theory on why the beast noticed the family and the attacks happened rests on the belief that both the man and his wife were wearing heavy amounts of cologne and perfume, and I'm not sure how a person would know that unless it had come out of some kind of incident report. The mother is believed to have been wearing something similar in composition to Estee Lauder, and Dad is said to have been wearing something akin to Canoe, both of which in 1982 might have contained actual musk. In 1982, it would not have been out of the ordinary for a man or woman to have slathered themselves in copious amounts of cologne or perfume, as it was sort of a prevailing custom of the day. It is theorized by alleged investigators and researchers that during the day, as the sun shines, the air temperature is heated, thus allowing the warmer air to rise. But as the sun began to set, the air would have cooled rather rapidly, allowing the colder air to sink onto the forest floor and create a sort of draft that would have drawn the air down through the hollers and down to the river's edge, carrying the irritating musky scents of the heavily applied cologne and perfumes, it garnering the attentions of the LBL Beast, luring it up to where the hapless family was parked. After Mom died, it is theorized that the daughter had taken refuge in the back room, where she had locked herself in hopes of escaping those slavering jaws of death. Sadly, the enraged beast, if the tale is to be believed, tore the door away and gained entrance to the child's only safe haven. That is said to be how the course of events played themselves out. But that is not the end of the story. We have to flash forward a small space of time, and no one knows how much time passed before the bodies were discovered, but it is assumed to be no more than a few hours, when a couple of hikers drove into the RV park and saw in their headlights the mutilated body of the dad lying in the road. The startled couple could clearly see that the man was dead, and they had no intentions of getting out of the car, so as fast as they could, they turned the car round and sped away to the neighboring town of Grand Rivers, where they alerted the police. And it is unknown how long it took to call law enforcement, as in 1982, 911 may not have been available. The 911 emergency number was created and put into use in 1968, but not all areas had it until much later. Tennessee, for instance, didn't start using the 911 emergency line until 1989. I would expect that Kentucky was probably in a similar time frame to Tennessee. Law enforcement, now alerted to the catastrophe, arrive on the scene to find a display of carnage unequal to even the most horrific spectacle that Hollywood has to offer. The local officers have never witnessed anything of this magnitude. Some are visibly shaken, as others violently gag and throw up. They begin to work the crime scene and find that Dad has been mangled by something with massive claws, and his arm has been pulled off, or so the story goes. However, a clue is found in the still clenched fist, and that clue is a handful of thick, coarse fur which is collected and sent to a crime lab for analysis. Law enforcement finds the son and the mother also dead, and then to their horror, they find clothing that belongs to a young girl who is nowhere to be found, meaning that there could possibly be a survivor and potential witness who may be able to shed a little light on what took place and what precipitated the events that left the RV park littered with bodies and body parts. Knowing that this possibly still living child may still be out there and in need of help, the officers and park rangers on the scene spread out and began to desperately search the area for any sign of the young girl. Two of the first officers on the scene veered off into the woods on the right-hand side and started to walk down the hill when one of the officers noticed a splotch of red on his partner and inquired if he'd been injured, to which he replied, no. As the two nerve-rattled peace officers stood there, the one with the red splotch began to feel his hat being pelted with a steady drip, drip, drip of something like red rain falling upon said hat. Both officers shine their flashlights up into the tree by which they are standing, and their eyes fall upon a grisly sight that will haunt them both for the rest of their lives and cause their hair to become prematurely gray if the story is true. Up in the crook, or the Y of the tree, is the mauled and partially devoured body of the missing girl. Now at this point in the story, we can say that we are contacted and asked to come to Louisville, Kentucky, and meet with a gentleman who, when we interviewed him, claimed to have had a relative in law enforcement who was alleged to have been at the crime scene working it, and he confirmed to us the story up to this point. Other individuals have reported to us that representatives from the government arrived on the scene and took over the investigation, dismissing the local law enforcement. The first two officers on the scene are reported to have left the crime scene and stopped at a local convenience store and relayed the terrifying course of events to a friend working at the store. Her full account can be found in the very insightful film work of Barton Nunley called Hunt the Dogman from Grindel Films. If you've not seen this film, I would encourage you to get and watch it, for this tale and others taking place in LBL. I would also recommend The Beast of Land Between the Lakes by Jody Cook and the North American Dogman Project. Before I trail off too far, I will say that the results in the hair sample found on the father was alleged to have come back as unknown, but were most closely related to Canis lupus, or wolf. Some of the tales circulating around about this encounter say that once the government became involved in the case, they sealed off the entire area and called for a special detachment of soldiers from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, who were said to have come in and made a skirmish line through the forest and tracked the beast to a cave located just south from the site of the massacre. The soldiers are said to have slain the gargantuan beast, which they say was so large that it had to be hauled out on a flatbed military truck. Estimates claim this monster was about 12 feet tall, but I would have to decry that estimate because it had supposedly forced its way into the RV to kill the mother. But here's where I have trouble with these estimates. RV doors in the 80s, when this crime took place, measured either 26 inches by 70 inches or 24 inches by 72 inches, and either one of those sizes would have been far too small to allow for a creature that size. Now I am 5'8", and my shoulder width is 20 inches or 21 inches, and my dad is 5'9", and his is 20 inches or 21 inches wide at the shoulder. So we're just a bit under 6 foot, or less than half the supposed size of the creature. If at just under half its size I am 20 inches wide, then logically at 12 feet it should at minimum double my width, making it 40 plus inches wide at the door. And a creature 12 foot by 40 plus inches wide, there's no way it would have fit inside that trailer. Now a creature 8 or 9 feet tall might have fit, and that would still be a massive animal. And that is the story in a nutshell. There are other details, but given the fact that individuals like Jan Thompson, Bart Nunley, and Tim Coonbo Baker have spoken and given such in-depth details of the incident over the years, it would seem like trying to reinvent the wheel to go over their accounts and repeat their words syllable by syllable. However, I would like to focus on one more area of Jan Thompson's narration in the Hunt the Dogman film, and comments she had made over the years when she would talk about the location of the supposed kill site, and similar comments and descriptions given by legendary cryptid researcher Tim Coonbo Baker, both of which gave very in-depth visualizations of the area, because both Jan and Coonbo have visited the site, Many people claim to know the location of the alleged tragedy, and they are close, but the area that they lay claim to as the actual site of the slaughter doesn't measure up to Jan's or Kunbo's descriptions. Jan talks about the horrific events taking place at an RV park that was said to be very nice for that date and time frame. Mr. Kunbo Baker backs up this claim, and he describes it also as very nice, complete with restroom facilities. Jan says that the location used to have a stream that crossed the road that led to the RV park. However, the stream is no longer there. Kunbo says that sometime after the tragedy, the landscape was altered. Jan says that the road leading to the actual location is near a cemetery and has a metal gate erected across it, barring the entrance. And she goes on to say that at the end of the road was a series of what are depicted as concrete bunkers. Now these are the so-called bunkers, and these have been the object of much speculation and mystery over the past years. Kunbo Baker, who was alleged to have been taken to the actual site by a friend in the know, talks about certain ravines adjacent to where the grotesque events transpired. Going by the overwhelming and vivid evidential descriptions that they have laid out, we feel about 99.9% confident that we have located the true site of the aforementioned massacre. As I said earlier, there are two sites that people believe to be the actual location. Site A is at the north end of the park and is down a twisty dirt road that leads to an old gravel roundabout close to the edge of the lake and has the remains of an old building that could have been an old restroom. Now this is alleged kill site number 1. Now this is what is generally regarded as the main kill site, and as you can see, it goes around a big loop here. So in theory, an RV possibly could come down here. It kind of flattens off over here where something could park. Even this side over here is right up against the river, and commonly when you research Dogman and their sightings and encounters, it always takes place close alongside water or rivers or bodies of water. And this leads many to think that they have found the location, and I will admit that it is somewhat close to an old cemetery, and the incident supposedly took place near a cemetery. And for a few years, we ourselves contended that this was the location. However, we no longer hold this belief, and we are not too proud to admit that we think we are wrong. One night we were down here with a fellow researcher camping, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we took out our silent dog whistle, which has had very good success with Bigfoot before, and we hadn't really tried it much with Dogman at this point. This was a fair bit back, and we blew it, and we started to hear barking or howling over across on the other side of the bank, across the river there. Can't confirm that it was anything, but it was interesting to say the least. And we now believe that Site B is the one true location, and here's why. At the northern end of the park lies an old cemetery, and I will not give the exact location because I fear that too many weekend adventure seekers would flood the area, hoping to see or encounter the mythic beast, and either A, go out to the site and possibly come to some harm, or B, go out to the site and interrupt someone's serious research that is being conducted, or C, just go there and bring a sense of levity to a place that should be a bit more solemn, because if the story is true, then 4 unfortunate souls died a horrific death, and that should never be made light of. We will show stills and footage of the area, but we'll try to keep it respectful. Here are a few reasons we now believe this to be the location. Reason number 1. The area that we now believe to be the one true site lies just across from the old cemetery. Number 2. It sits behind a metal gate, just like Jan Thompson maintained. Number 3. Evidence that a stream once ran across the road can be found in a stream that now runs down a steep ravine adjacent to the road, as if it had been diverted by a change to the landscape. Number 4. Many iron and metal boundary markers remain that may have once been the boundary markers from old RV parking slips. Number 5. All around the area, are the remnants of what look to be old bathhouses that are now torn down, and whatever they are, were once constructed of the same building materials that were once used around the time of the alleged incident to build various shelters in state and national parks. Almost all parks used these same types of materials, and almost all looked the same. Reason number 6. An old overgrown looping driveway or road that has long since surrendered to the forest remains and appears to have been part of a campground or RV park at some point. One area of the loop crosses over an old clay culvert that dates back to construction materials used in the 70s and 80s. This hollow culvert is possible evidence that a stream once ran through this area. Reason number 7. Littered throughout the area are a series of old electric poles that have been cut even to the ground, indicating that this area was once well lit. The destruction of the bathhouses, if I may be so bold as to use that term without knowing for certain what they are, and the remnants of the cut-down light poles really tend to make one think that someone wanted to get rid of this location and let nature retake it over, to rewild the area and let it fade into obscurity. Number 8. Stories always claim that the youngest victim was taken into the forest and down a ravine where she was placed at some great distance up in a tree. This area certainly has such a ravine. Reason number 9. At the end of the road, just as described by Jan Thompson, are a series of concrete buildings that have been dubbed bunkers. Over the years, these bunkers have taken on a mysterious air, as people have speculated that these are everything from containment units for the beast to military strongholds where soldiers could be safe as they hunted down and waged war against these supposed Dogman monsters. I am afraid, however, that we have sussed out the true nature of these mysterious buildings, and we could be wrong, but I think we have it right. We believe these are nothing more than dynamite storage buildings, left over from the days when the government altered the landscape and created the largest inland peninsula in America, after they wrested the land out of the hands of the local citizens. Here's why we believe them to be for dynamite storage. In our hometown of Dayton, Tennessee, we found nearly the exact same structure in one of our local parks that had once been an old coal mining company. The park ranger recounted to us the history of the park and the nature of the structures, and they were to serve as storage units for dynamite, to protect everyone in case a volatile stick exploded and to keep them safe from thieves. Reason number 10. Another thing that makes us believe that this is the site is the fact that all the stories about this incident claim that the beast came up the hill from the lake and attacked the family. How can you come up from the lake if you're parked beside the lake? It just doesn't make any sense. While we still cannot say for certain that this incident actually took place, it is very unusual that different people who supposedly heard the story firsthand from other different individuals always agree on the details. They may vary in small ways, but largely they are the same. Over the years, people have come forward and claimed to have worked the crime scene, and their accounts match exactly, or they will give details that few people have ever heard of. They can describe the condition of the bodies, what they were wearing, how the vehicle looked, the smells, who vomited or cried, how they were removed from the investigation, how the agents that showed up looked, what course of action was taken. The unusual thing is that many of these individuals can produce credentials that place them as law enforcement in the area at that time, or place them as park staff. People have actually contacted us to tell us that their relatives were on site and worked the case and gave details that matched up perfectly. Often these people who come forward described in exact detail the area that matches in exact detail the area that we refer to as Site B. However, we are now convinced that Site B is actually Site A, the only true site if the story is true. We here at Cryptid Studies Institute cannot say with 100% certainty that these events ever took place, but there seems to be an almost overwhelming circumstantial case for it. One thing is for sure, something of a bizarre nature is taking place in that park, and I will take a moment to mention a few of them. and we will look at them in closer detail at a later date if the Lord allows. 1973. A group of college kids from Murray, Kentucky are chased and pursued in their Volkswagen minivan by a large bipedal wolf-like creature. 1978. Jan Thompson and her cousins are pursued and attacked by a giant wolf-like creature that tried to break into their home to get them. And while we try to endeavor to stay out of Barton Nunley's research, we will, however, read a transcript from Jan Thompson herself of her personal testimony. The summer of 78 will always be a turnabout in my beliefs of real monsters versus the demonic or paranormal type. Ghosts and spirits had become a common event during my life growing up, until that particular summer, when a new avenue of fear introduced itself and made a permanent pathway inside my mind. A path made of concrete that wanders through the forests of my memories, a trail that will not be covered with weeds or fade with time, a place where my daily thinking bypasses to avoid the beckoning desire fear that calls from down that menacing road of remembrance. For this moment, though, for the benefit of you, the reader, I will travel down that route once more, and try to recapture the scene so that you too will lay awake wondering and asking the universe, is there something else out there, something that is above us humans on the food chain? It was on one of those hot July summer evenings in Grand Rivers, Kentucky, back in 1978 when this took place. Grand Rivers is at the beginning of Land Between the Lakes entrance. The sun was not completely down, and the skies were streaked with violet, pinkish, posy-colored clouds that outlined the curtain of darkness that was pushing the turquoise blues away. I was staying at my aunt's house with my cousins for a few weeks during summer vacation, a very welcome home at the end of a dead-end road. Hundreds of acres of woods surrounded the home that had been built down a hill and into the side of a large hill of dirt. There were several homemade trails throughout the woods that led to several places. An old abandoned railroad track that went on for miles, another abandoned place, the old sawmill, and other paths led to parts of the shoreline of the Kentucky Lake. They all started out as walking trails, but with the new addition of a dirt bike that my cousin Joe had, the trails became well outlined and defined. As with almost every day that I was visiting, Joe was out riding his bike through the woods, exploring, and just being with his own thoughts of a 13-year-old boy. His younger sister, Rhonda, was with me outside on the porch swing. She was 10 and I was 17. At the time, my uncle was working and my aunt was at the local IGA store down in town. Beside the driveway was a huge dog pen where their pet basset hounds lodged and was at the moment quite relaxed in the shade. Joe must have been way far off on a trail somewhere to not have heard that distinct sound of the dirt bike screaming through its gears, echoing around the trees. I knew he must be on his way home, because his dad forbid him to be out in the woods at dark. So Rhonda and I was waiting to hear the familiar putt-putting of the bike, slowly coming down the drive as he reluctantly came home to park it for another night. As we swung back and forth, singing silly songs, we heard something a bit strange in the distance. It was Joe's dirt bike, screaming at almost a soprano type of gear. Long, steady, and fast, with no shifting sounds, just a straight stream of one gear in motion with a full throttle, going at top speed. The sound accelerated as he drew closer at such a fast pace, and we watched from the swing up to the top of the driveway where he would appear from the other side of the woods. I couldn't help but think that he had better slow down or he would come flying up over the top of the hill and downwards, missing a wide stretch of pavement by being airborne. The noise didn't soften or slow. Steady and fixed was his speed, and just as I had thought, he emerged from the woods in such a tenacious movement that he did indeed go airborne a few feet before pounding down the front tire on the driveway, continuing his descent now with a struggle of keeping the bike upright and straight. Rhonda and I jumped from the porch swing and got out of the way, as we didn't know where he was going to stop or in what position. The brakes hit hard, and the bike slid sideways as it came down to the edge and into the drive. Joe tilted his body and let the bike slide out from under him before he went down the rest of the hill with it. Instead of the bike continuing to slide to the edge, it was caught in a spin that variably died down as the engine sputtered, and then quit altogether. Everyone was wide-eyed and full of adrenaline, all our mouths open in shock. But Joe's mouth was open in a strange, fearful grimace. He was sweating profusely, and his breaths were coming and going in great heaves. Tears were coming down his cheeks, mixing with the dusty dirt that the trail had left him powdered with. His eyes were at the top of the hill, at the top of the drive, unblinking, searching, waiting. We followed his gaze, not understanding what this escapade was all about. In silence, we watched with him for about 30 seconds, and then the dog started barking, growling, and then whining, trying to get out of the pen in a frantic panic of digging and gnawing at the fencing. It grabbed me. "Look at my leg," Joe screamed, making us jump with alarm at the sound of his voice. We looked down at his Levi's and saw scratch marks going across his right thigh, scratches that tore through the tough denim and left small, bloody marks on his skin. The marks were like a bear's claw rake, not those caused by branches or sticky bushes, but a definite wide pattern of a paw print. It walked on 2 legs. His voice startled us again, as he was trying to tell his story in between huge gulps of air. He was frightened beyond belief, and the bits and pieces of what he was striving with extreme effort to tell us was coming out in loud syllables that filled us both with the same dread. It was following me through the woods, along the path, from the old sawmill. Hairy. It was so hairy, and his snout was so long, and it walked on 2 legs. It ran on 2 legs. His voice was sputtering, slowing. His eyes were still wide, and I could see the pulse of his heartbeat throbbing under the skin of his temples. A howling began from the woods, not from the dog pen where now the dogs suddenly stopped their own complaining, standing deathly still, staring up at the top of the hill, the nape of the hair on their back standing up, ruffled, their noses up in the air, breathing in a strange scent. A wolf's howl. It was close. It seemed it was just a few yards from the road up above. Just as the idiot in a horror movie stands and stares at something to appear, that was what I was doing then, with a mixture of anticipation and confusion. What the heck was he talking about, I thought to myself, mulling over the brief descriptions. Torn blue jeans, walks and runs on 2 legs, stalking him, hairy with a long nose and calling the mysterious hunter an it. Joe's tears came quicker, and he started to push us towards the front door of the house, demanding that we go inside and lock the doors. He had a hand on each of our backs and was urging us onward when it came out of the woods above. At first, it appeared to be a very large wolf emerging from the dark outline of the trees, but as it approached the 1-lane road that connected to the driveway, its height grew to a towering shadow that stood on 2 legs, much taller than a man's height, maybe by a foot, and with the sun gone down behind the clouds, it only cast a silhouette of blackness, hairy blackness. My mouth dropped wide as well as my eyes. This was not happening. This was not what I was seeing. My mind was going back and forth from rationality to reality. I was from St. Louis. The most frightening thing back home in Missouri was Momo the monster, the Show-Me State's version of Bigfoot. This was no Bigfoot. It raised its long snout up in the air and let out a gurgling, slow, deliberate howl, while stretching its long arms to its sides and upwards, like it was praising the coming of the night, praying to the unseen moon and stars. At that moment, the security light that was at the top of the hill by the beginning of their driveway popped on. Slowly at first, it began to glow and gathered its energy to shine more brightly over the next few seconds. One of the creature's arms bent and shaded its eyes from the glare. It wasn't an it any longer, nor was it a Bigfoot. This was a wolf-like creature that, like Joe said, stood on 2 legs, was taller than a man, and was staring at the 3 of us down the hill. Those huge black eyes I will never get out of my mind. They were like 2 sockets of ebony oil shining under magnifying glass lenses. We ran into the house, tearing the screen door in the process, slamming the main door, locking it, pushing things, anything we could reach against the inside of the door. The kitchen was right behind us, and so was the knife drawer, which we raided and took several with us as we tried to decide where to hide. There was a house dog inside, another basset hound, Stubby, and he met us in the kitchen, wondering what the racket was. Another howl from outside, coming from the driveway. Stubby's hair raised, and he started backing up at first. Then he went to the front door, and was smelling around the edges. The three of us ran to my aunt's room and was about to slam the door and lock it when the dog tucked tail and ran after us, beating us under the bed. All of us squeezed under the four-poster, knives clutched in our hands, scared half to death. We could hear the dogs in the pen outside going absolutely crazy, barking, and we could also hear other things being knocked around on the porch. Then on the side of the house, then at the side door, we heard glass break. We could tell it was from one of the bedrooms. The windows were up high, and they were very narrow, so we knew that it would take some effort for anything to get through them. But still, we shivered from fright. My aunt's horn on her Cadillac sounded several times as she drove down the road and approached the house. That meant for us to meet her outside and help with the groceries. We didn't budge. We couldn't move. We didn't answer her yells from outside for us to come unload the bags. We didn't crawl out and unlock the door for her, nor answer her knocking. She finally had to use her keys and then give some hefty pushes against the pile of items we had up against the door. The trash can, 25-pound bags of dog food, water jugs, and a variety of other stuff. We stayed put. She discovered us only after all the groceries had been brought in, and she noticed that her bedroom door was closed and locked. It was amazing that we hadn't cut each other in some way or another with the immature use of the knives in our haste to hide, and we were chastised in more ways than one when it came down to my aunt observing us slowly emerging from her bedroom with the kitchen weapons in hand. We all started talking at once in a fervor, then we finally let Joe tell his story first. Then we finished with it breaking a window, just before we heard her horn on the car. She must have startled it. She didn't laugh. She didn't respond at all at first. In fact, she never said a word until she came back from inspecting the windows in the bedrooms. My aunt said, indeed, there was a broken window, broken from the outside in. She made us clean up our barricade and put up all the groceries. Later that night, after we were all in bed, and my uncle came home, she related that evening's events to him. The next morning, their dad warned us, stay out of the woods. No problem. He went on to say that he himself had went down in the woods earlier that morning and found several pits dug and filled with animal bones and parts of carcasses along the path that led to the old sawmill that couldn't be explained. There were also holes dug in the sides of the bluffs along the hills that overlooked the old mill that looked like deep caves, big enough for a man to hide in. Then he told us that years before, when the old Boy Scout camp used to be on the other side of Grand Rivers, that an unexplained creature with wolf features was seen along the water's edge close to the campsites. He and his older son had witnessed it themselves one evening. I went back home a few weeks after this happened, and since then it has never ceased to be a moment of complete terror lodged inside my mind, along with the horror experienced at the Oakwood home. It would only be a couple of years later, after moving from the city down to Kentucky, that once more I would come into the legend of the wolf creature by means of some old-timers that used to live in Land Between the Lakes, LBL for short. Their tales told to me while sitting on an old bench in front of the IGA down in Grand Rivers would help me draw a bigger picture of what this thing actually was. Then, a few more years in passing, in the early 80s, 2 police officers would tell me their own tale of the events of a tragic scenario discovered in one of the campgrounds down in LBL, events that were never published in the media. Just about 10 years ago, in the early 90s, Joe and my dad, who had come down from St. Louis to visit, decided to venture into those same woods in front of my aunt's house. They took a couple of pistols and 2 rifles and were gone for several hours. These were 2 brave men, the bravest I know of, both of whom served in the military and fought in 2 separate wars of their own time. These 2 men came back ashen-faced and bewildered. They had walked all the way back to the old sawmill. The pits, fresh ones, were still around, filled with the bones of forest animals. The holes in the bluff were still there also. They both experienced the feeling of being watched and felt an uneasiness that something just wasn't right. The area had no crickets, no bugs. Even the small pond was still and lifeless. The birds that did fly made their way around the area and refused to fly overhead. They couldn't shake the feeling of being observed by a secret watcher, and both swore they saw a large black shadow lurking in the shade of one of the mysteriously dug caves. That had been the first time Joe had been down that far on that side of the woods since he was 13, and both of them agreed that it was to be the last. My dad said there are some things you just can't explain, that science doesn't know about it, and these things should be left alone. They are not a part of our modern world. He felt that whatever it was that had scared the crap out of us so many years ago still existed in the same area. His intuition has never been wrong so far. Urban legend. Maybe some of the stories passed along the years have been added to, stretched a bit, like all local folklore and first-hand stories are over time. My story wasn't an urban tale, though. It was a first-hand account of something I really and truly do not want to believe in, and wish I could forget, erase from my memory, because the nightmares remain real, even though the events are still unexplainable by the laws of science as we know it. Just a mild disclaimer. While this is Jan Thompson's personal account, we cannot confirm or deny the validity of it, but we do want to give her the benefit of the doubt. Now that we've concluded Jan Thompson's personal testimony, let's continue with the other encounters in the area. 1979. A couple of campers are allegedly killed by a massive wolf-like creature with facial features similar to a hyena as a witness helplessly watches. 1982. A family of 4 is reportedly killed by a massive wolf creature. 1984. A couple is terrified by a bipedal wolf beast at Hotel California. 1991. A family on a campout is attacked and pursued by a creature described as a werewolf. 2002. 3 men camping are attacked and chased by an upright canine that is said to look like a werewolf. The creature starts out on 2 legs and gives chase on 4 legs. Another incident in 2002. A bow hunter's death is tied to the beast of LBL. 2016. A camper sees a bipedal wolf in his camping area. 2017. 2 more campers are alleged to come up missing under mysterious circumstances. 2019. We ourselves had a run-in with something of a frightening nature, and you can hear all about that in our Dark Hollow Nightmare Nugget video. Chronicled in the book, Real Wolfmen, True Encounters in Modern America, by the amazing Linda Godfrey, she relays one witness's account of seeing a mother upright canine and her pups crossing the road. And here's just a segment from that encounter in Miss Linda Godfrey's book. That realization made him really curious, so he pulled over and kept his bright lights on to provide a good field of vision. Something was moving in the tall grass at the side of the road, and it seemed to be making its way toward Frank's truck. He kept watching until finally the something emerged far enough so that Frank could make out its features. He instantly recognized the gray-black fur and snout of the creature he had seen cross the road earlier, standing upright at the roadside now, as if it were waiting for something. Almost immediately, 3 smaller replicas of the animal bounded from the other side of the road and ran across to join the bigger creature. They ran in the same semi-upright stance. Frank aimed his truck lights more directly at the group and gained a good view of the larger canid. It stood over 6 feet tall, glaring as the small ones walked near it, still also on their hind legs. With his windows down, he could hear the small creatures making what sounded like playful puppy noises. Another account shared has 2 tombstone rubbers being chased by a wolf creature on 2 legs. A werewolf creature is seen near the Wranglers camp. 2 men near LBL are followed and pursued from a slaughterhouse by a werewolf-type monster. Friends, these are just a few of the terrible encounters that are alleged to have taken place in the modern era, and the accounts go back as far as the 1700s. These or similar creatures are alleged to have called these forests home, killing livestock, filling the night with blood-curdling screams and unearthly howls, and potentially making a meal of more than a few unwary individuals over the years. And it would be very hard to prove because whenever you go to the park and do the dispersed camping, no one knows where you're at. We went back in the spring or summer, And I asked the park official if they wanted to know where I was going, and they said, "No, just go find you an area and set up camp." Think of that for a moment. That gives the park plausible deniability. If God forbid something did happen to you and you came up missing, all they would have to say is, "He bought a permit online and I don't know if he ever showed up or came and left. We don't have a record." When I hear of the Beast of LBL, for some strange reason, it makes me think of a line from the William Butler Yeats poem, The Second Coming, that says, "What rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born." While LBL is hardly Bethlehem, I would implore you, friends, should you decide to brave the backcountry at Land Between the Lakes, and you happen to hear the terrible howls emanating in the night, because out of the darkness they can begin, or you hear deep, guttural growls issuing forth out of the forest, do not linger. Flee, get to safety as quick as you can, because the bloodthirsty beast of LBL may be slouching toward you to make you its next meal. Until next time, I'm Elijah Henderson with Cryptid Studies Institute, signing off. In conclusion, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video on the barbarous beast of LBL. A tremendous amount of time, effort, research, and passion went into the production of this documentary video on this fascinating cryptid creature. So, if you don't mind, subscribe to our channel, Cryptid Studies Institute. It really helps us out, and it gets our name out in the public eye. And ring the little bell icon so you'll be notified when we upload the next segment. The Bell Witch of Adams, Tennessee, The Real Exorcist House, Dogman Creatures in Taylor, Mississippi, and the Devil's Crossroads are soon to be on the way. Also, keep an eye out for our 2 new series, Strangely Enough, which is our reading of your encounters that have been sent to us, and Time Lost Tales, which is stories of cryptids, the supernatural, and any other bizarre tale that has largely been lost to history and probably few have had a chance to hear. There should be another segment of Strangely Enough in just a matter of days, which will be a series of bizarre and unusual events from Middle Tennessee that span over a 15-year period, one particular event sounding disturbingly similar to a skinwalker of some sort, so hopefully you'll enjoy that. Go like our Facebook page, and please follow our Instagram. And if you have had an encounter of your own, then we'd love to hear it, and you can share that down below in the comments, or go to our website, cryptidstudiesinstitute.com, where we have our very own Report a Sighting form, which is one of the most extensive and detailed sighting forms of its kind, so we would appreciate it if you check that out. An update on our upcoming Middle Tennessee Crypto Creature Convention that we planned for July of this year. We received a phone call from the park, and unfortunately, due to the spread of COVID-19, it has been pushed back to May 19th through the 23rd of 2021, barring any more delays because of the virus. So that's plenty of time to clear your schedules. And finally, once again, thank you so much for watching this video on the Beast of Land Between the Lakes. If you'd like to see more on the bloodthirsty beast of LBL, or if you have an idea for a nightmare nugget, then shoot us a message or comment down below. Thanks again.